Shalom, welcome back to the Sequential Zohar Series. Today we are in Bereshit A, chapter 12, and the title of this section is The Three Lights. And I want to begin with a simple picture. Imagine standing outside at noon, when the sun is too strong to look at directly. You know the light is there. You feel it. It warms everything. But if you try to stare straight into it, you cannot receive it. It overwhelms you. Now imagine that same light at the doorway of a tent. It is still bright, but now it has a shape. It has a direction. It comes through an opening. Then imagine evening. The light is fading. Shadows are growing. Things are not as clear. And yet, that dimming is not a failure. It is part of the way the day becomes complete. That is the movement the Zohar section is teaching us. The light begins beyond anything we can grasp. Then it comes down in stages, in measures, in filters, until we can actually receive it without being shattered by it. The Zohar is not just describing light in the sky. It is describing spiritual light. It is describing the way divine energy moves from the unknowable into a form that creation can live with. The first idea is Ein Sof, the endless. The Zohar says that the endless light has no mark that the mind can hold on to. No question can really reach it. No thought can fully surround it. That matters because we often want spirituality to be immediately understandable. We want a clean answer. We want a definition. We want a sentence that settles everything. But the Zohar begins by saying, the source is deeper than your questions. Not because questions are bad. Questions are holy. But the root of reality is more hidden than the mind can capture. Then the text gives us an image. From the most concealed place, a tiny, delicate light begins to shine, almost like a needle point. It is so small, so subtle, that it is not yet something we can really grasp. But it is the first hint of revelation. And this is such an important spiritual lesson. Revelation does not always begin as a dramatic event. Sometimes it begins as a pinhole, a small opening, a quiet recognition, a feeling that something is moving, even before you know what it is. The Zohar then turns to the letter Aleph. Aleph is described as the beginning and the end of the grades. It contains many forms, many levels, and yet it remains one. In other words, before multiplicity spreads out into the world, there is a hidden unity inside it. This is why Aleph is so powerful. It is not just a letter, it is a map. Its upper point hints to supernal thought. Its middle line carries a central movement. And within that central line, the Zohar speaks of 6 grades: Hesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. So the Aleph is like a spiritual architecture. It shows us that what looks simple on the surface may be carrying a whole universe inside it. And that brings us to the 3 lights. The first light is connected with the letter Bet of Bereshit, the opening letter of the Torah. This light shines and is concealed. The Zohar connects it with Abraham sitting at the entrance of the tent in the heat of the day. Think about that image. Abraham is at a doorway. A doorway is not fully inside and it is not fully outside. It is a place of transition. It is the place where lower and higher meet. The text says, "This door leads from below upward, and light also flows from there downward." So Abraham represents the open door. He represents kindness, welcome, expansion, the right side. He is the energy of saying, there is an opening. There is a way up. And because there is a way up, there is also a way for blessing to come down. The first light is strong, generous, and expansive. But it is also concealed because even generosity needs a vessel. Even kindness needs form. Light without a doorway can overwhelm. Light through a doorway can become a path. The second light is very different. The Zohar says it is the light that gradually fades as evening approaches. This is connected with Isaac, who goes out to meditate in the field toward evening. Isaac is not the open tent at midday. Isaac is the field at dusk. The mood changes. The questions become heavier. The world feels less obvious. The shadows are real. And the Zohar connects this with prayer, especially the prayer of Minchah, the afternoon prayer. Minchah is prayed while the day is still here, but already turning. It is the prayer of transition. It is the moment when light is no longer simple. This is the left column. This is restraint, judgment, depth, seriousness, and inner work. And again, the Zohar is not saying darkness is evil. It is saying there is a spiritual stage where light must diminish. It must become more concentrated. it must pass through difficulty. Otherwise, we would never develop strength. We all know this stage. There are moments in life when the light that used to feel obvious starts to fade. A path that felt clear becomes complicated. A relationship, a calling, a prayer, a dream, something that used to shine becomes uncertain. The Zohar is telling us, do not assume the fading light means you have been abandoned. Sometimes evening is part of the work. And then comes the third light. The third light combines the first two. It brings the right and the left together. It is the light that shines for healing. Here, the Zohar moves to Jacob. After Jacob wrestles through the night, the Zohar says that the sun rose upon him. The Zohar reads that sunrise as healing light. This is the central column. Jacob does not avoid the evening. He goes through it. He is drawn into the struggle. He meets the force connected with Esau. He is wounded. He limps. But then the sun rises. That is the third light. Not the innocence of morning before struggle. Not the heaviness of evening by itself. But the sunrise after wrestling. This is why the central column is so important. It does not erase the right. It does not erase the left. It includes them and brings them into balance. Abraham gives opening. Isaac gives depth. Jacob gives integration. Kindness alone can become scattered. Judgment alone can become harsh. But the central line can turn both into healing. And this is where the Zohar becomes very personal. Because Jacob is not healed by pretending he was never wounded. The verse says, he limped on his thigh. The wound remains visible, but the wound is now held inside a larger story. The Zohar identifies the thigh with Netzach, one of the lower Sephirot, often connected with endurance, victory, and the power to keep moving. This is profound. The place that gets touched is the place of movement. The thigh is what lets you walk forward. So when Jacob is struck there, it means the struggle affects his ability to continue. How many people can relate to that? You survive something, but afterwards, you do not walk the same way. You still move, but differently. You still believe, but differently. You still pray, but differently. You still love, but differently. The Zohar is not embarrassed by that. It does not hide Jacob's limp. It studies it. Then the text says something very mysterious. it says, prophecy from that place, from Netzach, was weakened until Samuel came. Samuel becomes part of the repair. He is associated with the phrase Netzach Yisrael, the Eternal One of Israel. Through Samuel, that damaged channel is re-established. Later, David helps draw Netzach back toward the right side, toward sweetness and enduring joy. So the wound of Jacob is not only a private wound, it becomes a cosmic story of repair. This is one of the most beautiful patterns in the Zohar. A break happens, a weakness appears. The other side clings to the place where holiness has a lack. But the story does not end there. The repair may take time. It may pass through generations. It may need Samuel. It may need David. It may need kingship, prayer, judgment, song, and courage. But the repair is real. And if we bring this back into our own lives, the teaching is very clear. There is a first light in us, the Abraham light, the light of opening, hospitality, trust, and generosity. This is the part of us that can stand at the door and welcome life. There is a second light in us, the Isaac light, the light of evening, discipline, meditation, and honest confrontation. This is the part of us that can walk into the field when things are not simple. And there is a third light in us, the Jacob light, the light of integration, healing, and endurance. This is the part of us that wrestles, gets wounded, sees the sun rise, and keeps walking. The goal is not to live only in one light. Some people only want the Abraham light. They want everything warm, open, and positive. But without Isaac, that warmth may not have depth. Some people get trapped in the Isaac light. They see only judgment, struggle, and shadow. But without Abraham, that depth may lose compassion. And some people are afraid of Jacob's light, because Jacob's light comes after conflict. It requires us to admit that real healing is not the same as never being hurt. But the Zohar says the complete light reaches the world through these stages. First, what is too high to grasp? Then the tiny opening. Then the ladder, the structure, the doorway, the field, the evening, the wrestling, the sunrise, and the repaired movement. One more thing is worth noticing. The Zohar does not rush from mystery to application. It lets the mystery breathe. that is important for a modern reader, because we can be tempted to turn every sacred image into a quick lesson. But this chapter asks us to slow down. Before we use the teaching, we have to feel its shape, hidden source, measured descent, balanced healing. That slow attention is also part of receiving the light with care. So here is the practice for this episode. Ask yourself, which light am I in right now? Am I at the doorway, needing to open myself to blessing and generosity? Am I in the field at evening, needing discipline, prayer, and patience with what is unclear? Or am I after the wrestling, needing to let the sun rise on a wound I still carry? And then ask one more question. What would balance look like? If I am too open, maybe I need a boundary. If I am too guarded, maybe I need a doorway. If I am wounded, maybe I need to stop demanding that healing erase the limp. Because sometimes the holiest people are not the ones who walk as if nothing happened. Sometimes they are the ones who limp forward with more truth than before. That is Jacob. That is the third light. And this is why the chapter ends by weaving the grades together. Samuel is compared with Moses and Aaron. Netzach and Hod are joined. The 6 aspects are included within one another. The end of the teaching is not separation. It is combination. The lights do not compete. The columns do not cancel each other. The patriarchs are not isolated symbols. They are stages in one movement of divine flow. The light becomes receivable because it learns how to arrive. And maybe that is the message for us too. Do not despise the stage you are in. Do not despise the tiny beginning. Do not despise the doorway. Do not despise the evening. Do not despise the limp. Each one can be part of how the light reaches you at the measure you can receive. The endless is beyond us, but the endless still finds a way to enter our world. Sometimes as a point, sometimes as a letter, sometimes as a door, sometimes as a field at dusk, sometimes as a sunrise after the hardest night. And when that sunrise comes, it does not mean the wrestling was meaningless. It means the wrestling became part of the healing. That is the 3 lights. In the next episode of the Sequential Zohar Series, we will continue forward from here. keeping the flow of Bereshit in order, one section at a time. For now, sit with this. The light is not absent just because it changes form. Sometimes it is expanding. Sometimes it is narrowing. Sometimes it is healing. And all three are part of the journey. I will see you in the next video. Shalom.